You're listening to Diva Tonight with Carlene Humphrey, a relationship podcast with a focus on life, love, and friendship. Welcome to Diva Tonight.
Hi, I'm Carlene, and this is Diva Tonight. We are in the Zoom studio with Michael T. Brown. He's in Virginia. He's a licensed counselor, leader, author, and leadership development. Thanks so much for joining me, taking the time to be on the show. And, you know, this show is about like relationships and the relationships we have with our friends and our family. And, you know, I've looked up your background and, you know, like your dad was a pastor, and I always find it interesting, people who grew up in a faith-based household, it can either take you in that direction or it can steer you away if it doesn't align with your beliefs. So as someone who grew up in the church, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, I would say it was a positive experience. You know, my parents, you know, really worked hard to try to, well, we were engaged in it. So it wasn't just like, come and just kind of sit and get, you know, it was kind of, you kind of put the work. So it's like, you know, and when you get the opportunity, when you got friends there, and obviously, you know, when you have a chance to have a positive experience and you get a chance to actually engage in ministry, you know, it feels less like work, and it feels, for us, in many ways, it felt like family. So I'd say, it was by and large a positive experience. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, it felt like family. And so like, I think like your dad like instilled a lot of like core beliefs for you. And do you feel like that kind of got you to where you are here and now, like as a counselor? Certainly.
My dad played a significant role. And, you know, there's an African proverb, you know, that says, right, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. And I say my parents did a really good job of having a village surrounding us. And he certainly played a tremendous impact in that. He had quite a story and background himself. Both my parents did, as far as, you know, navigating life and some challenges in life. And, you know, we all are going to experience difficulty and pain in life. And I think that's a big part of what that allowed me to gravitate towards church and the message, you know, centered in church. And that is that, you know, none of us are perfect.
Yeah.
We all have experiences that lead us to where we are, and that our faith can play an integral part in helping us discover our purpose. And I think, you know, faith communities, when done well, can help us tap into some of the bigger, larger questions of life. You know, why am I here? What am I called to do? Can I be a part of something bigger than myself? You know, that goes beyond, I think, just religion or dogma, you know, right, or doctrine. That helps us tap into our identity and our purpose. And now being able to look back and thinking about those investments that were deposited into me at a young age, you know, those seeds that were planted will grow, and they'll help lead us to what we're called to do now. So, yeah, I'd say by and large a positive experience. Not perfect. We always have challenges and ups and downs, but yeah, I'd say it's an integral part to who I am.
I mean, you know, I reference your dad, and like, you know, what about your mom? Like, was she like the preacher's wife, or did she have her own career path too?
Pastor's wife. She worked as well, you know, various jobs, but yeah, she was a key part of, you know, that local ministry as well. And it's interesting, you know, my dad, who's now transitioned, I got to experience some different walks of life. So when I was, you know, early in my college years, my dad transitioned away from full-time pastoring and got into, you know, some entrepreneurial endeavors. He still would minister. So I got to experience, you know, growing up in a preacher's home, but I also got to experience seeing that shift and that transition where he was no longer, you know, pastoring a church. So all those experiences, you know, help shape who I am.
Yeah. Did you feel like there was a pressure to like, you know, work within the church because you grew up in that environment? I feel like there's that stigma. Do you feel that?
Yeah. Well, I was a musician, so I played trumpet and drums. So again, I would say it was not so much a pressure, but it was kind of ingrained in a way. When you just grow up in, imagine somebody who works in a restaurant, if their parents own a restaurant, right? It's kind of like, did you feel pressure taking out the trash? Like, that's just what we do, right? So, right? It's just kind of the family business in a way.
Yeah,
so I would pressure in that sense. And a big part of that is because, again, once you're engaged and you have friends and you form a community, now there's certain pressures, maybe some scrutiny, being a pastor's child, but it's hard to compare when it's just what you grew up in.
Yeah, for sure. So based on your own personal experience, was that something that you knew, like you said, being in that environment kind of like gives you your purpose or, draws you to your career path? Do you feel like there was something that spoke to you about like, this is where I want to go?
I think in many ways, it chose me versus I chose it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people can relate to that, right? Where, you feel something on the inside, you feel a passion or a calling or a burden towards something, or you just naturally gravitate towards certain things. And, going into education, I wouldn't have told you as a child that's what I would do, but I kind of got led towards it. Things just kind of get revealed to you and you just feel drawn in a certain area. I knew that helping people, I felt a sense that was going to be my lane. I didn't know exactly what that capacity was going to be, but I got led towards it.
Oh yeah. I mean, and then, doing that for the amount of time that you did, I mean, 10 years. I think they say it's not 10 years, 10,000 hours in any skill is your profession in that role. So you feel like as being a counselor in school, do you feel like it kind of led you to where you are now in private practice?
I do. And actually, I spent 10 years as a middle school counselor, but a total of 17 years as a school counselor. So yeah, those years certainly was preparation for private practice, I would say. You talk about, right, those 10,000 hours, right, that many consider a benchmark to consider yourself an area expert in something. Yeah, I think 17 years working in the school system, working with families and students was a nice training ground to prepare me for what I'm doing now in private practice. Yeah, so I really see the connection in all of it.
Do you have a moment or like moments where you look back to those experiences, with students? I guess the students then and the students now, I feel like, we're a different generation, right? A lot has changed, right? A lot has changed.
I remember when I started as a school counselor, when MySpace was first coming on.
Oh my gosh, MySpace! I remember.
You remember MySpace? Okay.
Yeah, like a MySpace account. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, I remember when and everybody was like, "Man, what is this?" And that was the start, right, for a lot of people getting into social media, and to see that. How it's transitioned over time and how it's grown and how, it's changed a lot of our habits. Yeah, what a shift, right? Over time. We can learn a lot about ourselves when we look at how we interact with each other online. And, I think in many ways, a lot of people are realizing, right, with a lot of the laws that are coming out that we need to connect, not just through our phones and through media, but through person-to-person interactions. Now, the media can certainly help with that, like we're doing here now, right? The technology allows us to do things like this, to connect in different locations. But I think in many ways, we need to get back to the way we did it, the way we did some things back in the day, as far as just person-to-person contact.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I feel like being a child back then and going out to play and like just, doing stuff and not having to worry about like certain things. Obviously, we did have like some hard times too, but I think I remember like, just walking home from school, like, whereas now I don't think many people would do that with with their kids now unless their school's really close, but it's a different time. And so I think there's a lot of things that are novelty. Like, I went out with my sisters on the weekend and I just remember we were talking about like the things that you do when you're a kid and like get yourself into trouble and stuff. And, just not having a cell phone or, knowing your parents not knowing where you are, but you have to get home by this time. You know what I mean? And so I think there's something to be said about that because the change in time and just our experiences were totally different, Yeah. So the students that you counsel as a counselor, like, do you feel like you would give different advice now? Cause you're talking about interaction and the one-to-one medium versus virtual, right?
Yeah. Good question. In many ways, the more things change, the more things stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
There's something oftentimes about one generation that often looks back and thinks their generation is so much different from the other generation. Back in my day, and clearly there's been some changes, no question about it. And particularly you think about how fast the technology has moved and how we can interact. So there's no underestimating the power of, social media and technology. However, let's take it even to the dating realm, right? I know you talk a lot about relationships, right?
Yeah.
So
let's talk about that.
You talk about, in dealing with young people or dating, social media or the dating apps are just tools to connect people. But you still are you going to go on a date, right? I mean, so eventually you're going to need to have that one-on-one contact. So as far as speaking to youth and speaking to adults for that matter, use the technology. Don't let the technology use you.
Can you elaborate with that?
Understand that it's a tool to connect you, but you still need to have people skills.
Yeah.
Right? If you go out on that date, are you just going to sit there and scroll on your phone, or are you going to put it away and actually be able to hold a conversation? So the tool, the app may connect you, but if you're eventually going to form a relationship, you're going to have to form it outside the phone or outside of text messaging or outside of just FaceTime. Eventually, right, we need to connect and meet people and be able to interact and communicate well. So I don't put too much credence on, this whole idea that so much is different. At the end of the day, relationships are, right, in order to be healthy, we need to have good communication. We need to have good people skills. We need to be able to build trust. We need to be able to build connection. And for example, the county that I live in here in Virginia, the school division said no to cell phones. The kids can't have them in class.
Yeah.
So we're getting back to some things. You get it? Mm-hmm. So the pendulum tends to swing where, and now some of the tech companies, a lot of the scrutiny that's coming on that, a lot of parents are getting more involved in there. You may get a teen account now, and there's certain more protections and things that are coming in. So, the more things change, in many ways, the more they stay the same. Remember the parents in the 60s? Or can you imagine them saying, right, how different they were from the 50s? Of course. Where are these afros and bell bottoms coming from, right? They thought maybe the sky was falling. Come to find out, trends, fashions, things change. Technology certainly shifts things. We're in a different era when it comes to that. But we're still human beings, and we're still looking for a lot of the same things we always have.
With the advancement in technology, though, I feel like there's some things that do need to change because the progression is going a lot faster than I think we could have anticipated. I mean, we saw it coming. I mean, yeah, I'm sure you've lived through many of the changes. I grew up, I was born in the 80s. And so now it's like you're looking at things and I'm thinking back to Terminator and the movie AI and a lot of these things. And I don't know.
So you probably didn't have a Walkman. You probably had a CD player?
I had a CD player.
Probably
yes.
CD player. Yeah. You probably missed Walkman with the tapes, but it was CD player. Yeah.
I did.
Then the iPod, right? And then, right. Yeah.
An
so
MP3
kind of
player,
moves
I remember when it was my CD player, my friends were like, it's time to get an MP3, Carly. And
right. Then it was obsolete.
Yeah.
It moved so quickly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so, I mean, we're talking about technology and relationships, but how do we build healthy relationships?
Great question. I think it starts by making sure that we build a healthy individual first.
Right.
Yeah. When we love ourselves, when we value ourselves, when we show up whole, then I think two whole people that meet are going to have a much better chance at a healthy relationship. So making sure that our mental health, our physical health, our emotional health, our own personal spiritual health is healthy. And when you get two healthy people that meet, then, things can kind of take off from there, where they can communicate well with each other. They have a connection, a chemistry, a camaraderie that it's not just one way or one-sided, but that both understand the principle of give and take, and that, everybody needs to bring something to the potluck, right? Come with something to share. And I think that's key, is I believe healthy relationships are made up of healthy individuals. So I commend you for doing podcasts like this. The more content, right, we can get out there with people that they can absorb good information like this. That's their investment into themselves to work on themselves. And then when they meet somebody with similar values, similar interests, similar goals, then that's going to make for a more healthy relationship. Knowing what you want in a person, right? Becoming what you want in many ways. Yeah.
Diva Tonight, glamour for your ears.
So with the clients that you have or you've had or over the years, if there's unresolved trauma or all unresolved issues that person needs to work on, how do you help them, work on those things? Because I find like therapy or counseling, it's some people don't think they need it.
Well, usually by the time I meet someone in therapy, they've already checked that box because they've reached out for counseling.
Oh, okay.
So that's good for starters, right? The whole idea that they've identified they want to work on some things, or they might need some help in some areas. And awareness is the first step towards change, right? Knowing that we may have an issue or have a problem. So that's key, awareness.
Yeah.
Right. And then, a big part of it is understanding who they are in their story. You talked about trauma, and we all are going to experience, some pain or difficulty or adversity in life. Some people, it falls in the category of trauma, where it's, maybe more on the extreme end, that's more debilitating. But realizing that we can heal, we can work through our pain, our difficulty, our trauma, and work towards our goals. And in therapy, that's kind of where the magic happens, where we start unpeeling some of those things, understanding what happened to you. I learned this early on, before we ask what's wrong with someone, ask what happened to them, and hearing their story and saying, where do you want to go? Spending the time working through any past pain or trauma, but ultimately pointing to where you want to go towards your goals. And that process that happens in therapy, when done well with someone who really wants to change and really wants to grow, we can heal, we can process, we can forgive, we can hit the reset button and move forward. Now, we may have to walk with a limp, we may have some scars, but still moving forward nonetheless.
Yeah. I heard you say, like, you're talking about, we can walk with a limp, and you've talked a lot about, like, I've heard you say about influence and how some books can be an influence, or, that movie or that video can be an influence. And for those people who had the trauma, maybe they were able to find the influence in a book that they read when they were younger to see something, because sometimes seeing is a lot easier than, and I don't know if it's seeing, but like you were talking about it in that way. And I resonated with that, because I think when you're in an experience in life, you know what I mean? What do you say? You're trying to escape it in many ways. And I guess that's what you help your clients do, right? So
That's right. The human spirit, Carlene, is indomitable, is powerful. There's something in us, right? Mm-hmm. That often knows there's more. I was listening to, Jesse Jackson passed away, here recently.
Yeah.
And I was checking out some of his stuff, some of his videos. And he said he would have a line that he would say to people in crowds. And, when he would meet people, he'd say, you may have been born in the slums, but the slums was not born in you. There's something about the human spirit that wants fuller expansion, that wants to strive, that wants to achieve. It's in us. Mm-hmm. And maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a friend who sees something in us that maybe we don't see in ourselves. And maybe they put a book in our hand, or they expose us, or they took us to their house, or we saw, it was like in this side of town, or, you talked earlier before we started recording, right? How books impacted you. And, as children, well, as adults, people tell us oftentimes, don't daydream. Yeah. But as children, that's one of our greatest gifts, sitting and daydreaming, or going out in the yard, just looking up at the sky, just creating our own imagination. Children have a great ability, right, to tap into imagination, creativity. A lot of folks out there listening may have had a make-believe friend, or, right, or a pet rock or whatever, right? Why? Because they were using their creativity, their imagination in books, movies, videos give us a glimpse into another world. There's somebody who's listening right now who may be on the other part of the world. 10 years from now, isn't that powerful to think how powerful technology is? Somebody may watch this video 40 years from now, right? You know, and may hear something. That cool, right? That they may hear something in another part of the world, or another part of the country that sparks them. Maybe it's a book, and they start using their creativity, their imagination. They just start dreaming and exploring of what could take me out of this situation. Somebody may be living in a painful experience or a painful relationship, or grew up in with a difficult home life, but they would imagine what they could be, or they would picture themselves in that book in another world.
Yeah.
And that's not just hopeless daydreaming. That's casting a vision. Why? Because the human spirit wants to grow. It wants to expand. It wants to achieve. So that's why it's so important, that village that we grow up in. It's so important to use the technology as fuel to help take us to the next level. Just online mentors that we can have of people we never even met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who died already, who've transitioned, and we're still learning from them through their books, through their videos, through their content. Yeah. So we talk a lot about the technology. People talk a lot about the negative aspects of technology, but I see so many positives if we'll use it the right way.
Yeah. Oh, you said that. That's so true. Like for me, Muhammad, like you talked about, like I forgot who you mentioned.
Jesse Jackson.
Jesse Jackson. Yeah. And for me, like, I look back at Muhammad Ali and so many great speeches that he had. And I always feel like, even though he was a boxer, I felt like he had so much spoken word and like so many things that he said that we still can relate to now, you know what I mean? And so there's someone who knew at such a young age that he's like, I'm going to be a champ, at 12 years old, something. I think it was what I saw there. So, I mean, you say a lot about that vision. And sometimes I think, like you said, like when you see your clients, like it's the vision is blurred. And I think that's what I think of sometimes, where it takes some people a little bit longer to get there than for some people who already knew, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. Well said. In the process of counseling, the process of therapy. For some people, it's therapy, it's counseling. For somebody, it may be phoning a friend or having a mentor or a coach or a colleague or somebody that shows us a different path, a different way. Ultimately, we have to do the heavy lifting. It needs to be our own vision, right? For our own lives. There's no substitute for that.
Yeah.
But other people can sometimes see things in us that we might not be able to see in ourselves, or the trauma or the pain disrupts us on our path. But we can find our way back onto that path, or find a new path, a different path. Because I believe at the end of the day, we all were born with a purpose and have greatness on the inside of us. We just got to tap into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So as someone who has private practice now, and like you teach a lot on leadership and relationships, what are the important keys to success?
Great question. I think it starts with a goal and understanding what it's going to take to reach that goal. Who, what, where, when, why, how. When we start answering some of those questions, what is it that I want to accomplish? What is it that I want to achieve? What's my passion? What's my purpose? If the goal is to just seek money, then people may go down some paths that they might not be as passionate about. A lot of times they get disinterested and don't have the staying power. But if we change our purpose, in many ways, I think, resources will follow us. So I think it really starts with a goal. What is it that I want to accomplish? What is it that I really want to achieve? I remember as a school counselor, I would ask that question, and I still ask people this question to this day. If money were not an issue and you got to choose a career purely based upon passion, meaning I'm excited about waking up and doing this every day, what would that choice be? And that question, right, can pull on us to really self-examine of what is it that I really want. Oftentimes we start talking ourselves out of what we really want. Well, I really want it, but I don't have this, or I don't have that, or I don't have the training, or I don't have the background, or I don't have the money. And we get it. It needs to be realistic goals. It might not just be a hobby, but something that's a viable calling or a purpose or a career mission. I think it needs to start with a passion, with purpose, and casting that vision. And then once we get the what right, what is it I want to do? we can really lean into the how and who can help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I heard a quote here recently that I really like that says, and this ties into who can help me. One of the greatest hands we're ever going to be given is the one that's at the end of our own wrist. It's something about when we use our own hands towards our own goals that propels us forward.
Wow. Yeah. Those are some deep words right there. Yes, definitely. I think it always starts from you. And I mean, you talk about your village. And so what did your village look like to get you to here and now? Because I mean, you are successful in what you do and you had the village. And what did that look like for you?
Yeah. Dr. King calls it, right, beloved community.
Yeah.
And, family members, friends. I have siblings, older siblings, one younger sibling. So family looks like village, our school community, being involved in athletics and music. I encourage people to get young people involved in something positive, to get them just off those phones and get them into an activity. Yeah. I used to say, be too busy to get in trouble. Busy doing the right thing.
Yeah. So true. Definitely.
Idle hands, devil workshop. Idle mind, devil workshop. So that's what it looked like, being a part of things bigger than myself, being a part of sports teams, being a part of bands. You were one of a group. It wasn't all about you. You had to be a team player or you didn't, or it wasn't going to work. So that's what it looked like for me. And I think that's what it looks like for a lot of people. What about for you, Carlene? What would you say has been key to you doing some of the things you're doing, some of your accomplishments? What did it look like for you?
No, I think you're right. Yeah. I had my friend who's always a couple of my friends always believed in the podcast, even when I stopped doing it. So those people that remind you, to get back at it and having a good mentor. And I think when I think back, COVID was that reminder that I read something, someone posted something. And if time was an issue for you to get things done, now that you have more time, are you able to do that? So I was like, there's no excuse now, right? Yeah.
And you paid attention to it and you acted on it.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Here we are. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing for sure. Yeah. So are you the oldest out of your siblings?
No, second to youngest.
Oh, okay. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so I have one last question to ask. As someone who is very thoughtful with their words.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Great question. I think about this question of legacy. I have kind of maybe somewhat of a different view on legacy. And I think legacy is not something that I can answer. I think legacy is the byproduct of the work that we do. And so in many ways, legacy is for someone else to answer. My hope is that, gifts, skills, opportunities, blessings, I was able to tap into and try my best to maximize. And my goal is to help other people reach their goals. Yes, for me to reach my own personal goals. Right? Obviously, that's important for me to have my own goals. But my goals in many ways are connected to other people reaching their goals. So I hope that a life of service, a life of impact will be a part of what I contribute. The question of legacy, that'll be for those who've been touched by it and impacted by it. And I would say the way so many people have touched my life. My hope is that, we'll continue to inspire others to do the same, just like you're doing through this podcast. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And so it's Brown's Leadership Consulting, LLC. And most of your clients are in Virginia? Do you do a lot of in-person?
I got folks I see across the country. I see folks here in person here. And I also, like this, when I get speaking opportunities, or training opportunities. So I have a private practice. And within that, I can work with businesses or organizations on things around leadership and trainings and development. And speaking opportunities. So yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. And where can we find you?
Yep. You can Google me, Michael T. Brown, LPC. Yeah. And you can find got a few different websites out there where you can contact me, brownsleadership.com. And I'm on X at @MTBrown98. And they can find me on LinkedIn as well. Same handle.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Michael T. Brown, for sharing your words of wisdom. And I think the one other thing though is through, like, now more than ever, I think mental health is a concern. And so
Absolutely.
what do you think should, like, if someone is thinking that, maybe I do need to ask for help, like, even though you always say there's like your friend or someone that you look up to, but like, just starting.
Yeah. If you notice you're struggling and you got some issues that are pervasive and you keep running into stumbling blocks, or you really need somebody from a professional, non-biased perspective to talk to or work through things. I encourage people to find a good therapist in your area. And for people who have, medical insurance, they can oftentimes just pay for it through a copay there, or, go online, find a recommendation, do your homework. And a lot of times a therapist will give you a free, 15-minute or 30-minute consultation. That way you can ask them questions and learn more about them and see if it'll be a good fit. But, in many ways, I think the stigma is coming down. We all know, right, on a certain level, whether it's therapy or not, it's great to have people to talk to. And if you need it, it's okay to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. I'm Carlene, and this is Diva Tonight with Michael T. Brown.
Thanks for listening to Diva Tonight. Follow us on Instagram at Diva on the Radio. That's Diva with 2 I's. And don't forget to follow us on TikTok at Diva on the Radio for more clips and conversations you'll love. Want to share your thoughts or send us a message? Text us anytime at divatonight.buzzsprout.com. Until next time, stay fabulous.